Welcome to Visit Leavenworth's Talkin Schnitzel podcast. I'm your host, Ann Peavy, and I'm here today with Troy Campbell, Director of the Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce.
And today we're going to be talking about the Bavarian transformation of Leavenworth. And I'm going to be turning the script a little bit today because as far as the origins, the history, and for those that don't know, is a former board member, current volunteer, helper of the Upper Valley Historical Society who run the Leavenworth Museum. So Anne is my expert and my go-to person for all things history about Leavenworth. So a lot of people wrongly assume that Leavenworth is Bavarian and German because of its ancestry, that we had settlers here that built the Leavenworth that we see today. That is not the case. It was the brother of the same guy that named Leavenworth, Kansas, Leavenworth, Washington. But it was not from that. It had a completely different origin. So Anne, can you tell us what are the origins of Leavenworth becoming Bavarian?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a bit of a history nerd, self-proclaimed, but definitely love it. And having been, I think I'm fourth generation in this valley in my family. So it's something I've always been really interested in. And, you know, I knew a little bit about history before I got involved with the museum, and I know a lot about it now, which is great. So focusing way back tens of thousands of years to when the Sipisquosa, the Native American tribe that made this area their home, then when the settlers came in the mid-1800s, really looking for fur, trapping fur more than anything else. They settled in a little spot kind of near where the confluence of Icicle Creek and the Wenatchee River are today. Okay. And they called that Icicle Flats. Oh, okay. And they were there in Icicle Flats for about a year before they realized it wasn't the best place to be, and ended up sort of settling in present-day Front Street in Leavenworth. The Great Northern Railroad came through this area just as it was pushing from east to west across the country in the late 1800s, 1890s roughly. And the Great Northern stopped here and realized what an opportunity there was for growth because of the mountains, because of the river, just all of those opportunities. So Captain Charles Leavenworth was part of the Okanagan Land Development Company. He saw the opportunity as well and very quickly put plots together and had opportunities for people to buy land in the area. Of course, the Great Northern ended up making I call it the divisional hub for the railroad at that point, because the population here in Leavenworth was about the same as Wenatchee at that time. Okay. It's quite surprising. So as the railroad developed in Leavenworth, it was really the end-all be-all here. I mean, Leavenworth was in a heyday when the railroad came through town. Present-day Highway 2 actually had 7 lines of railroad tracks going through it up until the mid-1920s. If you can imagine that. There was a big roundabout about where the Enzion Hotel is. And part of what was happening with commerce in Leavenworth in the area was the Lamb Davis sawmill, which was about the best I can describe it, is near where Enchantment Park is today. Okay. So that lumber mill was taking timber that had been floated down the Wenatchee River from as far up as Lake Wenatchee, off the hillsides around this area. They were milling it, they were kiln drying it, and they were shipping it off east and west to different areas that had cities of growth: Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma. You know, I don't know how far east they went, but that was the livelihood of this town. And at the time when things were really bustling here, they said Leavenworth was the wildest Wild West town, if you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. So it had everything you'd see in a Wild West town, from brothels and debauchery and saloons to a beautiful opera house, which was later where our library is right downtown. So things were going gangbusters until about the late 1920s, and that's when the Great Northern realized they were having some difficulties. It was after the Wellington disaster, that horrible avalanche and train crash that happened in the early 1900s.
Where the train was on the track when the avalanche.
90 people. After that, they realized it was really dangerous for the trains leaving Leavenworth to continue through Tumwater Canyon, which is where the line went at the time, because of snow slides, mudslides, rock slides, and they were spending so much time cleaning off the the tracks there, it became problematic. So their solution was to move their divisional head down to Wenatchee, just 20 miles to the east of us, and to pull the tracks out and bypass Leavenworth completely. So as you can imagine, not only did all of those jobs that were railroad-dependent jobs move down to Wenatchee, but most of the people did too. So they said at the time in the early 1930s, once the railroad left, that the only people living in Leavenworth were the people that couldn't afford to move. It was a welfare town through and through. The majority of buildings in downtown, what you see Front Street today, were boarded up. There was just nothing there. The common thread that remained in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s was this heart of a community of ladies in different ladies' clubs wanting to keep things as good as they could, I guess is the best way to put it in the area. They were keeping flowers in flower pots to make things look nice. They were helping clean up streets and, establishing parks for people to be, but it still struggled. And so come around the end of the 1950s,
Did they still have timber at that time?
The sawmill left just about the same
It's
time
about
that
the
the
same
railroad
time,
did.
okay.
They didn't take all of the lumber out of the area, but it just started sort of
Atrophying.
It definitely did. So by the late 1950s, Bob Rogers and Ted Price, they had vacationed a lot in an area just this side of Stevens Pass called Merritt. And it was an area they loved, partially because Bob had been in Bavaria in World War II, and that whole area reminded him of the lush greenery within that area where he was for so many years. So a few years later, a little Cole's Corner Cafe came up for sale. And Ted Price, being sort of the entrepreneur of the two, decided they should buy it and they should remodel it and turn it into their own restaurant somehow. So it wasn't much to start with, but Ted's idea was to turn it into some sort of a place where people would not only want to come and gather, but something that was an experience. So they thought about a couple of different ideas for the restaurant, and they came upon the idea of turning it into sort of a Bavarian, which they actually called more of an Alpine design right after World War II. And they created what today is known as a Squirrel Tree restaurant. And so the Squirrel Tree then had a little bit of a transformation in adding a hotel to it at the time. But it was a place where ladies would be wearing dirndls, serving up schnitzel. They had piped in accordion and yodeling music. A great big stone fireplace with a huge mural sort of the landscape of the area. And it was really popular.
Yeah, and now this is Cole's Corner. So for those
Right.
not familiar with our area, Cole's Corner is about 20 minutes north of Leavenworth.
Northwest, yeah.
Northwest of Leavenworth as you're headed up Stevens Pass. Eventually that will take you to Everett, Seattle area. They didn't have a vision for Leavenworth at that time.
They did not.
Correct? They were just looking out for Bob and Ted.
And they really wanted to expand what they had up there.
Yeah.
But just like today, it's a quieter area up there. The infrastructure just wasn't there for them to create more than what they already had.
Yeah.
But Ted, being Ted, had his eyes on Leavenworth and started to get to know the locals. He started to hear the stories of people being, destitute and tired and wanting more for their community.
Yeah.
And so they put their heads together, and eventually, through actually an association with the Chamber of Commerce, they were connected with someone
Yay, Chamber.
at the University of Washington through their, I believe it was their economic development department. It was a self-help studies for small towns that were struggling.
Okay.
And so basically what the University of Washington did was they said, we're going to give you the tools to help yourselves. So the town put together about 20 different committees looking at what Leavenworth had. It was kind of like a SWOT assessment.
Oh, okay.
What are our,
Strengths,
our strengths, our weaknesses? What do
our
we have here?
opportunities and threats.
Looking at the river, was
Yeah.
that an opportunity to have a pulp mill here on the river? Wouldn't that have been a different experience?
yeah.
Looking
Solid
at
one.
schools and how that was. There was no such thing as a tourism committee. So once the committees had formed, Ted realized that there was an opportunity for tourism. The committee heads basically said, sure, well, we can have a tourism committee, but you're going to head it up then. And he agreed to do that. I think it was in his best interest, though, because he was also able to sort of drive home some of the ideas that he had. So the same woman who was commissioned to paint the mural over the fireplace with the squirrel tree at the time, Ted pulled aside and asked to do a rendering of his vision of what Leavenworth would look like. And it's the first drawing. We have it at the museum, not for display yet, but it was the first time he put his vision to
On the
paper.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he said it didn't showcase everything he wanted it to. It wasn't as grand and as beautiful as he felt it really was. So he kind of kept it to himself. Yet he still had the idea. He went down to Solvang, California, which, if you know, is a Dutch town. Talked with them about how did you create this out of what you have. Well, theirs was a town that was kind of started as Dutch, but they did rally around the idea of creating all the Dutch buildings. So Earl Peterson, who was a self-made architect in that area, said, you know what, I'm going to come back up to Leavenworth with you, and I'll help you folks design your town.
I did know that.
And he did.
Shout out to Solvang, California.
Oh, man.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I think the people of Leavenworth were a little fed up with Ted because he was definitely a promoter, not so much a self-promoter, but a promoter of Leavenworth. And I think he's the only person that could do what he did, and that was to create a Bavarian village out of an old washed-up Western town.
What a vision.
Right?
A visionary, yeah.
So that first year, he also brought in an architect from Seattle who donated his time. That was Heinz Ulbrich, who was a German architect.
Okay, yeah.
So very authentic detail, even at that point. But many of the townspeople that were tasked with making their buildings look, they called it a Swiss Alpine design or an Alpine design at the time. They didn't really have a lot of funds to do much.
Yeah.
So what they did was they put facades on most of the buildings and did the best that they could. And at the end of the year, the first 6 buildings were completed. That was in 1965, I believe. I hope I'm right about that date, as I am a historian. But there was a celebration that happened with that. Not everyone in the town, as you can imagine, was thrilled with the idea of, like, are we really going to become a German town or a Bavarian village or an Alpine village? Well, they decided that they wanted to invite the locals into town to see, even though things look a little different to you, you can still buy your shoes here. You can still go to the bakery and get, pretzels or sweets or whatever you like. And so what they did was they created the first Christmas festival, the first Christmas lighting in Leavenworth, where each of the windows on the buildings had a wreath that was lit up that night. They brought in carolers from Kashmir, and they had cookies and hot chocolate for people. What they found were that more people had kind of heard about what was going on with Leavenworth and came in that night to see the town more than the locals did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you just never know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
But it was the kickoff to what became so notable to so many people around the world now. That first Christmas lighting where the light came on, it was just one tree at that point, and on the businesses. Each business had a solid color of lights, whereas now you'll see a little more mixed lights. Oddly, it was my earliest childhood memory, was my dad pulling in downtown on Front Street in our yellow Ford station wagon and pulling me out so I could watch this activity happening. And,
that's amazing.
60 some odd years later, it's fun to reflect back on that and just think of all the changes that have happened since, how meticulously it's become now in that design, that old world Bavarian design, and what led us here.
Yeah, well, it has been a complete evolution since those days, because they didn't, although they had the Heinz come in and help them with that initial building, many people were left to their own devices to kind of figure it out. What does Swiss Alpine mean? So some hit the mark and some definitely missed the mark.
Absolutely.
As far as if you're looking at real Bavarian architecture and what the traditions are. And that is what's kind of take us on this evolution that we're on now to this day, because back then things were added to the facade of the building to make it Swiss or Bavarian, where today we're actually building new buildings completely in the style of the Bavarian buildings.
Isn't that incredible?
And that's incredible. And that we have an entire architect firm here with expertise in this and helping everyone with those challenges of making sure that we're authentic, because now the focus is on authenticity. It is how can we make it as authentic as we can, and to the point where I think we get teased that we're fake but I argue that we're actually more authentic now.
Tell me more about that, because I know
Yeah,
you just took
that's
a
a
chamber
dramatic
trip last
statement,
year
isn't it? Yeah.
to Bavaria to see
Bavaria.
what was going on there. Tell me your impressions of that and sort of how that relates to what we're doing here.
Well, it made me, of course, stunning. I mean, Bavaria is beautiful. The towns are amazing. But one of the things that really stuck out was that we really pay attention to the overall aesthetic, not just making sure it's Bavarian, but making sure that nothing detracts from that. So what we saw there was things that we don't allow, like being able to roll postcard racks out onto the sidewalk, clothing racks with contemporary designs and things on it that really kind of take you out of that old world moment. So when you're there, you're like, okay, I'm in this town that's hundreds of years old, but everything in my visual landscape is contemporary clothes and things that are being sold. So us not doing that actually makes us more feel authentic. And we've actually had Germans tell us that, like, we don't allow neon signs, we don't allow flashing signs or strobe lights or blinking things or racks out on the street. So because of that, it ends up looking more old world Bavarian than an old world Bavarian town in some cases. So I like that. And then just the focus on our murals. We have murals in town done by Gibbs Graphics that are complete replicas of things that you would see in Meyerhofen or Garmisch, or some of these towns are beautiful murals that have a lot of reference back to Germany. And then, like I said, our buildings being built in a style that is what you would see in Bavaria. It's not just creating something and then making it look German. It is a German style building. I think one of the best example of this would be the Rheinhaus building with its patio and the way that's a beautiful building. Book of all seasons. You got we got some wine tasting rooms down below. So great building, totally in the Bavarian tradition. We've got some other ones that have been built, some Hans and Franz cabins. Those are adorable. Those are over by the McDonald's. Again, very much like what you would see. So yeah, that is kind of, I think one of the things that people that you hear from visitors, and I know you've heard this too, is, and they do it twice, even the Starbucks, even the McDonald's, right? So even they have to conform to our codes, which are pretty extensive. So there's a whole design review board.
Yeah, tell me more about who makes sure these things are kind of to the letter of the law.
A committee called the Design Review Board. Anything being done in Leavenworth, whether it's a new sign on your building or your remodel, whatever, it needs to go through a design review
Colors
board.
And fonts, I
Colors
imagine.
and fonts. There's everything is specified. It sounds really sounds kind of strict and like, wow, that seems like a lot. But you know what? I've also worked and represented communities that didn't have this, and they wanted it so bad because they want an identity. They wanted something. And I've done, before I was in Leavenworth, I did PowerPoint presentations on Leavenworth, talking about, this is how it's done, you guys. This is when you have your codes tight and good to go. This is the byproduct, and what the byproduct is a town that is so amazing that we get over $8 million in earned media a year.
Wow.
Meaning that's just media writing about us without us even having to pitch them.
People love to love Leavenworth.
They love to love it, and it's just such a transportive place. I've bumped into people from Australia, from India, but it's made it really valuable in that, but it's also made it a really special destination for the local region. And so many people now, after all these decades of being around, set their traditions and some of the things that they do by what we do in Leavenworth.
Boy.
And I always like to share this. I was in a big box store in Wenatchee shopping for Christmas lights a couple years ago, and I overheard some people run into each other. Oh, haven't seen it. They're doing the talking. You can't help it over here. And someone said, oh, you're buying Christmas lights. It's time for Christmas. And the guy replied, no, it's not. It's never Christmas time until we go to Leavenworth and see the lights.
Oh.
And I was just eavesdropping, living my best life, loving that. Because,
could you say that into the microphone,
yeah,
please?
could you come on my podcast? No, it was great. But yeah, just now that we've done this, it's now become known across the world. We were just, featured during the World Cup Germany game.
Right.
25 million viewers, got a whole
Holy moly.
2-minute presentation on Leavenworth, basically, and got to meet our town and some of the folks here.
Oh, that's a great segue into community pride.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think people don't necessarily think of when they think of Leavenworth.
Yeah.
But when I look back and I think of the hardships that people went through, some of those people that were remodeling their buildings in the early 1960s, they were mortgaging their homes, their cars, taking out loans from families. There was no federal funds involved in that. There were no grants that they got.
Yeah,
These
no.
were people putting all their chips in on this big idea that Ted Price had.
The city leadership and chamber leadership, as well as some chamber members, went to and did a tour of Bavaria last year, going to many of the towns that inspired the looks and architecture of Leavenworth, to learn more traditions and bring more authenticity back, because we're about sharing that culture and celebrating that culture. And Bavarians love Bavaria. It's funny, you go around, you don't see any German flags, you see Bavarian flags everywhere. So yeah, it is. From the fact that this has helped made us terrorist free, pandemic free. When some of the worst things have happened in the world, a lot of people, when they can't travel and they can't get away, they turn to Leavenworth because we're a great place to come and, like I said before, just have that experience where you feel like I'm living in the snow globe.
Yeah.
For a day.
Aren't we lucky?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I'm glad we could talk more about the history and sort of why this town is what it is today.
Yes, and I will make a plug for your own organization there. If you are coming to Leavenworth or you want to learn more, go to the Leavenworth Historical Museum. It's above the Nutcracker Museum on the corner of Front and 8th Street. Front and 8th Street, Leavenworth Historical Museum. Great exhibits in there from the indigenous peoples to a little display about Bob and Ted and everything in between. So.
Absolutely. Open 11 to 4 every day, and kids are free.
All right. Well, till the next time we get to talk some schnitzel.
Thank you, Troy.
I'll see you then, and thanks. Bye-bye.